Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live event. And hopefully it doesn't freeze up on us. I have to apologize. Last night we had some issues with some local construction around the area, and it was jamming up the internet. And everything we tried to fix it just would not work. And so we had to abandon last night and do a little fixing today. So we kind of did a workaround, and I like to thank Travelify and the group from Pace International for the hotspot that we have temporarily put in here. We're going to hardwire to them later, but that got us up and running. So I'm got some of the questions that came up. I'm your host, Dave Solberg, if you didn't know that. And we are the RV lifestyle and repair community. We've got a new branding that's going to include more lifestyle rather than just repair. But tonight we're going to talk about maintenance and repairs, and we got a lot of questions up here. I do see from last night there's a few questions that I can't get to, and Katie's going to try and pull those back in. The first one I get up to is where Eric's starting to talk about how it's cutting out pretty bad. And then Peter asks, is that an Oscar behind on Dave's desk? And that's not an Oscar, but I wish it was an Oscar. I'd like to thank all the little people that helped. No, this is a Telly Award, and it is the Premier Video Awards that in the industry. And I've won several of those. And the only reason I brought that up is that a couple of the live streams that I do, when I get to the end, they play music to tell me wrap it up. And so I said, it kind of sounds like the Oscar award presentations that you only get 30 seconds. So it is a Telly Award. And I think I've won about 15 of those. And then I quit submitting because it costs too much to win them, basically. Okay, so let's get back into it. Dwayne says, okay. Hello, everybody. We're rescheduling for tomorrow. I wonder if the storm is interfering. It's not the storm. It's construction that is in this building right now. That they sold the building, and I built my studio in here, and they were in messing with all the stuff. So anyway, okay. So Wayne says, I am getting ready to start the process of finding my first travel trailer. With all the confusing, never buy these brand articles, it seems like there aren't any quality brands at all. How do you sort through what is worth purchasing and what isn't? We do have some good videos on purchasing, what to look for when you're walking around in those units. You know, right now I hear a lot of people talking about how the quality in the RV industry is the worst it's ever been. And I don't agree with that. I don't say the quality is fantastic, but in 1988, I started in a department at Winnebago called the Dealer Communications, and we took new units out around the country. And for 3 years, I was on the road full-time, 5 years on the road, totally training dealers. And I would go out 6 to 8 weeks at a time. And I took a new, and it was called an N series. And the quality in the 1989 model year products was absolutely horrible. And not just Winnebago. It was, everybody was using Mindy board, and everybody was using the new chassis that had come out, and everybody was using this Luan interior paneling and fiberglass roofs versus rubber roof material. And I don't think the quality today is any worse than it was in 1989 and other years throughout. But the thing that you find is last year they sold 600,000 RVs. You know, that was 240,000 more than the year before. And, you know, so now you've exploded everything out there. You've got more units that are going to have some issues with them. They take them back to the dealers. The dealers can't get parts. They're overwhelmed. They lost a lot of their service technicians, so they can't get it taken care of. And so the thing that I noticed, though, is that back in 1989, I couldn't tell anybody. We didn't have the internet like we have it today with all the forums and all the stuff that's out there. And I've talked to several manufacturers. I've talked to several parts manufacturers like the air conditioner companies, the refrigerator companies, all those people. And I said, what are you seeing in, you know, percentages of warranty work and stuff? The percentages are actually down. You know, Winnebago's less than 1%, but you take 4, 5, 6 times the volume and that 1%, and then you put it on the internet and it looks bad. So the thing that I tell people is, you're always going to have some issues, and you have to approach it from the same way you would if you build a house. And so, or buy a house, you'll spend weeks, months looking at the different types of carpet, the different types of furniture, the cabinet pulls, that, all this stuff that you look at in the house. And yet you go to an RV and you look at the floor plan. You don't look at the details. And what are they hiding with silicone? And open up the doors and you see lots of sawdust and that type of stuff. And I ask people in my seminars, I say, how many of you have ever built a home? And I find a couple people out there, and I say, so when you got done building that home, you had no punch list for the drywaller, for the landscaper, for the painter, for anybody, and they laugh. You expect that when you buy a home or you build a home. You expect to have some of this stuff because you've got these different materials. People are looking at motorhomes and travel trailers like a car. You want zero things to have to adjust. And yet it's just like building a home. You got wood, you got metal, you've got carpets, you've got fabrics, you've got all these different components that are put together. Then it goes 70 miles an hour down the road, and then you let it sit and get 120 degrees during the summertime inside when you're not using it, and minus 20 here in northern Iowa in the wintertime, and you expect zero defects. And so, what I tell people in my buyer seminar is take the time to look at all those components. I don't have to have Corian and marble and all that kind of fancy stuff in there, but I want to look at how the cabinets are made. There's a lot of Walmart style furniture out there where they take stick pine and they staple it together and they put a piece of paneling over it and cut the hole out, and that looks like an oak cabinet. And they're amazed when it starts to sag down a little bit over time. Not that those are bad, but it's something that you have to understand that, I can't take this down I-90 going across Minnesota because it is the biggest washboard in the world and put 40,000 miles on these trailers. If I'm just going to leave it somewhere and let it set, that's fine. It works perfect for those. So understand how you use that unit and start looking at those attention for details. And the other thing you got to remember is, for somebody out there that has bought an RV and has had very few issues with them, they don't post on the forums. You don't see them very often. There's a few that come on and say, hey, XYZ RV, you're bashing it like crazy. Well, I love it. So you can find just as many people that have loved their RVs, but they're just not telling people. So again, I get back to the fact that take the time to look from a residential standpoint of how those cabinets are mounted, the type of fabric used in it. A lot of these manufacturers are just trying to cut as much cost as humanly possible because you're not looking for it. You're not asking for it. So you see two units side by side and one's $5,000 less than the other one. And the dealer's going to say, well, that's because it's a Monaco, or that's because it's a, whatever, and you're paying for the name. Well, you're not paying for the name. You're paying for better fabrics, better quality carpet. When was the last time anybody asked what type of carpet is in this RV? What's the fiber ounce per yard in these? The average home is going to have somewhere in the 30 to 70 range, and really nice carpet. The average RV is going to have about 10 or less. And it has no pad underneath it other than a real thin little piece in there. And so those are the things that, you get what you pay for, and you have to decide if I'm going to use it just sparingly through the months in the summertime and store it 3/4 of the year. I don't need 30 to 40 fiber ounce per yard. I don't need the Highline fabric, which has 10,000 double rubs with a steel brush. It's called the Weizenbeek double rub. So anyway, I'll get off. I get a little passionate about that when I get into the seminars and the shows. So you can see the manufacturers, and frankly, just about every manufacturer has different levels of their price points. And you're going to have cheaper fabrics and cheaper manufacturing processes. You're going to have stick and tin interior in those, and they're not bad. But again, you cannot take that and fill it full of all kinds of stuff and put 40, 50,000 miles on it. You're going to have to do maintenance on it, more maintenance. So anyway, those are the things I would look at those videos. do some research on that stuff, and you'll start to see the difference. It's just like a home. You can tell the homes that are built in a factory and two pieces come together and they got all that Walmart furniture versus a custom built home. So we got EJ then from last night again. How do I replace the thermocoupler pilot in the Magic Chef oven without having to take the whole oven apart? And that one, I have not gotten into the thermocoupler more. I've left more of the appliance stuff to Steve, but I do believe that that is something that you have to take. And what he's talking about in a thermocoupler is it is the sensor that the flame has to hit to tell the gas valve or the control module that we have a flame, keep the gas coming, because it's, it creates the arc through there, or the continuity through it. So typically you're gonna have that. I don't know that you have to pull that Magic Chef apart, but you did not say what year. So what I would recommend, EJ, is to write that in on one of the social medias, the Facebook or stuff like that, and we'll research it. I will be able to track that down and give the model, the year and the model of the Magic Chef oven that's out there, because they've been using those for a lot of years. Thomas has a 2021 Gulfstream BT Cruiser, and he's 5240 and having problems with the retractable steps into the coach. Originally, things were fine, but then gradually started acting up. Seems the step had a mind of its own. When we're ready to leave, we turn the always out switch, whatever it's called, to retract the step to be ready to drive off. After we close the door, the step usually goes in as it should, but sometimes it doesn't. But then briefly goes back out, then back in. So that's what we call gremlins. They were all the time. I would believe that your step is a quickie step that is now owned by Lippert, and there are ways of testing that. Normally, when you get intermittent like operations like that, it's usually the connector plugs inside. Or not inside, underneath. So if you crawl underneath that, you'll see where it's plugged in, and you'll have a series of wires. And I would take and pull those apart, get some of the electric spray that you can find at automobile stores. You could have moisture in there. It could also be a bad ground or a loose ground. That's pretty common, because you get underneath that, you will find the really bad rust on that bottom section. And so the way that step's supposed to work is you've got a magnetic switch. When you open your door, you'll see where there is, the old style was a plunger. When the door shut, it pushed the plunger in, but it kind of pushed it sideways and it would break the plunger. So now most of them have just a magnet that comes in and out and creates an open and a close, telling it to open or close. You reverse the motor in it. Make sure that magnet is in place, that it's not loose, that the wires in that are first. And then so when you open the door, then it tells the step to open. Now you should have, you're saying the always out switch, meaning inside the door you have a switch that says steps on or off. So if you turn that on, or you have the step out and you shut that off, the step should always stay out, or it should always stay in. Now I have noticed in a couple of the ones that I'm working on right now, Thor 2015, Thor Challenger, that that one I cannot leave it out or in all the time, no matter what that switch position is at. When I open the door, it comes out. Now it does have an override, so when you turn the ignition switch on, it is supposed to pull that back in so it doesn't ruin it going out. I have seen those go bad many times, and that's usually a control module thing. But if it's intermittent, I would say then crawl underneath, check that switch first, then crawl underneath and check that connection. You'll see about a 4-wire connection that has just an automotive style plug-in type deal. And that's where you also would test it. They have a wire loom that actually I purchased. We had a ICANN Renegade because it worked opposite of what it was supposed to. When you turn the ignition switch on, the step would come out. And so we went in and got bought the test pigtail, I guess it's called, hooked up to a 12-volt source and started going through the options of it and sure enough, it was going backwards. So we knew it wasn't the switch that was doing it. It was the motor. And so we replaced the motor on that, and it worked perfect. So those are the things that I would look for. Thomas says, again, okay, when we're underway, we sometimes hear the steps go out, then back in. Other times there's no problem. We had the dealer check it out and said they realigned the sensors on the door and the frame, because that's the magnets I was talking about. It seemed okay until we drove for a while. Then the trouble started all over again. Faulty door sensor switch. Very possible. Faulty, always out. So if it's a 2021, it should, well, I'm assuming, but if you had it worked on under warranty, it would be documented, and I would definitely get back with the dealership and have them take a look. But, you know, get in and check those connections too, because some moisture could get in there, condensation could get in there, loose ground. You know, a lot of times these gremlins, dealers will go in and, you know, 90% of the time it's the switch alignment. So they realign the switch. That to me doesn't sound right, because if, you know, if the switch was misaligned, it would always do that, and, you know, not just intermittently. So that kind of makes me think it's more in the wiring of the ground. Okay. By the way, love your show and website, Tom. Thank you, Tom. I love having you guys here, and it's you know, it's nice to be able to walk through some of this stuff. And I tell you what, I learn almost every time I go through this. It's like, what, really? So Marshall has a 2021 Heartland Sundance with Adzell, and I think it's Asdell. And the prior owner hit something that gouged the side. He used some kind of latex to fix it. It does not leak, but we would like to ensure it is repaired properly and looks better cosmetically. What can we do to properly seal it? Fiberglass or some kind of sealant that is better. It's 1.5 to 3.5 inches deep and about 1 foot long. So what you have is this model here, and I guess I don't need this anymore. I just need my mouse. This model is a Winnebago, but it's typical of most of the manufacturers out there. They're going to have an outside fiberglass skin, and you can see it's very thin. It's, you know, 1/16 of an inch. Then normally they had Luan paneling, an 1/8 inch Luan, which is just a wood panel, you know, kind of a sandwich type deal. And the problem with Luan is they put it in there to add structure, but also to fasten things in to give it some kind of a bite behind it. But if you get any moisture penetration up in here, Luan's going to start to flake apart and delaminate. So company came in and brought in Asdell, which is a replacement for this Luan. Some use it just on the outside, some use it just on the inside. So that is like a composite, a plastic type of material. And if you go to Asdell's website, they can give you more information on it. But to fix that, you know, I mean, it's no different than the Luan. You've already got something in there taking that Luan and styrofoam. I would just get somebody that can do a good fiberglass patch, because it's only an 1/8 inch in here. So you should be able to get in there and do some type of fiberglass repair. And then, you know, the challenge is matching the color of fiberglass, because there's about 15 different beige shades out there. And then the gloss on the outside is what kind of gel coat does your manufacturer have? And I'm not familiar with Heartland, but I would imagine that they've got a pretty high gloss outside, and that means more gel coat, more of the clear coat on the outside of it. So you should be able to get somebody that has a little bit of fiberglass skills and be able to patch that up. So Eric says, where are we at here? He's got a 2013 Jayco Greyhawk Class C, good size 32 footer. This question is reposted from yesterday. Okay, thank you. What is the guidance for rotating tires? How many miles between rotations, and what is the proper pattern? Assuming rotation is somewhat limited by dually rims that aren't interchangeable with front, etc. And that is true, because you're going to have duals in the back. You're going to have the fronts have the different type of rim, you know, because it's going to be the outer rim, in the back where it's the inner style rim. And RV manufacturers, you probably, more than likely, you have a Chevrolet chassis on that Class C, and they don't recommend rotating tires. They recommend just as they wear, watch them, see what kind of tread wear you're getting out of it. If you do have something that is bad, most of them that I have seen have not had any type of rotation pattern like you would in a car or a truck. I'll have to check with Trey Sealman is the executive director of the RV Safety Education, and he's in direct contact with the tire manufacturers. But since you don't have the tires are not able to be interchanged in all the positions like you would in a car or truck. They just recommend that you check your pressure every time you go on the road, check that sidewall for weather checking, that type of stuff, cover them when you're not using it, and check the tread on that. And they say 330 seconds, I believe it is, Lincoln's head on a penny, but that is for a car that weighs about 10 times less than you do. I typically recommend about 530 seconds, which is the DOT truck requirements for over the road trucking tires. So kind of err on the side of safety. Mark says, hi, I had my bearings repacked and noticed when I was braking the trailer, did not stop as well. So I increased the power in the truck, but it took a lot for it to stop. Okay, stopping. Now I have self-adjusting brakes, but still didn't seem like they were working as well. Then on a trip, all of a sudden the truck jolted back and forth quick. Felt like it's something in my back seat or in my front seat. I did it twice, so I scrolled back the power to the brakes to a smaller level, even though it's on the highest point of the truck and D. So, okay, Mark's got a fifth wheel, 29 footer. So you got a little bit of weight going on that fifth wheel. And I would say that it sounds, without being able to walk through this in my head a little better, that, adjust repacking the wheel bearings should have done nothing to that, the braking capabilities of it, unless you had some bearings that were, so dry that they were holding up the fifth wheel. And that's not very common because of the weight of that fifth wheel. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, because I learned a long time ago, you never say never or always in the RV industry. But I would say the first thing that I would do, when you repacked your wheel bearings, did you do anything to that braking system? Did you move that? You got magnets in there that, are supposed to bring those brake pads in and out. So I would say you probably need to pull those back off again and take a look at those magnets and those brake pads, unless you said 2020. So I don't know with Arctic Fox if you've got disc brakes on that thing. I doubt it. I think you have the drum brakes on there, but if you repack those bearings, you might have got something in that when you put the hub back on, maybe something got misaligned or the magnets. I've seen where even one magnet gets cut and it's not working. So you don't realize it, but only one side is braking, the other side's not. So I would make sure that, both sides are braking. The first thing you could do is just go take a magnet with you. And when you take that off, just see if the magnets are working in there, got power to them. And then, check your brakes and see what's happening on the inside of it. So it's difficult in something like that without pulling the hub off and physically seeing what's going on. David says, I have a 2000 Newmar Dutch Star. The right front jack cylinder will go down, but won't come back up. What can I do to fix this problem? I assume that a check valve or a solenoid is not working properly. So I believe in your 2000 Newmar, you have a HWH system. They're out of Moscow, Iowa. And the way that system works, I'm pretty sure that you have the internal hydraulic system with it. So you've got, when you push the lever or hit the button, hydraulic fluid pushes the jack down to the bottom of it and holds it in place. And you're right, there is a solenoid. And then when you go to release it, there's no springs on that jack. You know, some of the other HWH models will have springs that bring them back in, so the valve just opens and lets the hydraulic fluid go back in. But I believe yours has an internal hollow cylinder, and what that does is that it pushes. Then you've got a solenoid that switches the direction of the hydraulic fluid, and it goes down and it comes in through the bottom, and it pushes that jack back up through the hollow tube in the middle. So somewhere that solenoid is not working. I would get a hold of HWH. They got a great technical department. We just had a 2016 ICANN Renegade that the jack stayed down, and the owner bent it, not knowing it had not retracted. And so we had to cut the jack off, and there was that hydraulic fluid all over the place. So give them a call. I'm sure they can kind of walk you through what solenoid. They'll send you a wiring diagram, and you should be able to find that. Jerry says, I have a 2019 Laredo fifth wheel trailer, and clear coat has come off the front side by the end. Clear coat has come off the front side by the entry door. Is this something I can redo myself? You can. We were just talking a little bit beforehand where that gouge was at. What you're going to need to do is just basically go in and rubbing compound that entire. So what he's saying is that his clear coat here has faded, or it's peeling off. You see this a lot of times on travel trailers that are sitting with the nose facing west and getting that harsh afternoon sun and just beating down on it, and UV degradation if they don't have any protection on it. So I just saw something on here. I'm like, what? Yeah, so you're gonna have to do a little polishing compound, maybe get a little higher grit than that, get it down into the gel coat, and then just go to any part store that sells paint and fiberglass repair kits, and you can get a gel coat that goes on top of it. You got to be pretty familiar with painting and doing some automotive touch-up stuff, but you should be able to do it. And I would recommend do a little bit of research on YouTube, find some videos. We have not done one on that. It's a little more narrow of a scope at this point. Not saying that we won't do it, but the first round of videos was trying to get all the appliances, all the generics, all the maintenance, troubleshooting for that. And then we hit COVID, and we were limited in what we could do. And George did a wonderful job on that trailer, but he did it by himself basically. So that allowed us to do that. But you should be able to, and go into a parts store that has fiberglass repair and just pick their brain on what they have that's the best. So here's Pat said bypass, and I'm not sure we had a question from Pat before, so I'm not sure what bypass means, other than I'm going to bypass that question. Dave W says, I have a 2022 Grand Design Transient 221RB. The entry door is difficult to open and close when the weather is hot and the sun shines on the door. Talked with the selling dealer, Lippert and Grand Design. Dealer hit the frame with a 2x4, but still the same problem. Can't get any action taken to correct the issue. When it's cool outside, the door opens and closes better, but still not as it should be. So I would say 2022 Grand Design, you need to get a hold of Grand Design personally if the dealer is not going to step up and do any more with it. It sounds to me like what's happening is expanding and contracting. So when you put those doors in, there's supposed to be a tolerance so that you leave a little bit of gap in there to allow for that expansion and contraction of the different materials. Metal's going to expand and contract different than fiberglass, than wood, than aluminum, that type of stuff. So you're getting some swelling in that unit, and you need to, probably what they're going to need to do is take that door out and just, clean out around that entire area. Because sometimes what happens if they're built at a certain temperature and they go in and just fill that entire gap in the inside of it. Sometimes they do it with that expanding foam. Well, then it expands a little too much, and you have no clearance in that. So you need to go in and check those. And I would, like I say, I would get a hold of Grand Design, maybe even Lippert. You said you've talked with them, but take some measurements, and when it's cool outside, measure every point you can. Start from the top and do every 6 inches. What do you see for measurement side to side on that unit from the frame, what you can find? And then when it's hot and it's hard to open, do the exact same thing. So the more specifics you can have about how that is traveling and expanding, the better you're going to be able to get somebody to help you out. What they're trying to do with the 2x4 is sometimes the frames get bent a little bit, the weight of the door, and I think they were trying to, or the hinges start to get misaligned, and so. But if it's expanding and contracting with cool and hot temperatures, then it's more in the clearance. Joe Rodriguez has a 2005 Tiffin Allegro bus, has a fiberglass roof. My question is about resealing the fiberglass roof. Do you need to remove old sealant and apply new sealant? Some techs say Dicor does not work with the sealant that Tiffin uses. What do you recommend for Tiffin roofs? Well, you're going to have the same kind of roof as Winnebago uses. It's basically a Chemlite, which is Crane composites. It's a fiberglass roof. It doesn't have quite as much of the gel coat because you don't see it up on the top there, and you don't want it that slippery. Normally you don't have to do anything to the fiberglass. I mean, some people wax it just so it does, and with a Carnauba wax or a UV protection so that it doesn't fade and it looks nicer. But, I don't think there's really anything you need to do with the fiberglass portion of it. What you need to do is to check the sealants around the front cap, because on your Tiffin, you're going to have a form built fiberglass cap. And what that means is that a great big, huge wooden form, and they shoot in either a chopped fiberglass with the resin or lay in layers and roll it in with a resin. And it's just layer after layer after layer after layer. There's no luan or anything in there. And then it meets up to the rooftop that's like this. And you're going to have a J channel right there, it's called. So it's something that can move a little bit with temperature changes like we just talked about beforehand, because even though they're fiberglass, they're two different fiberglass with wood and thicknesses and structural integrity. And so what Tiffin most likely used was a self-leveling lap sealant. They didn't use Dicor. And you got to get the sealant that is designed to be applied to fiberglass. You can't just get any silicone, even though they call it silicone. What I've got here is 311 RV. I got it from Winnebago on one of the projects we were doing, and it is a self-leveling sealant for RVs designed for fiberglass. So if you have rubber membrane, you want to do something different. You don't want to use the one necessarily made for fiberglass. Now, this happens to be the Dicor product, and we got this. It's a roof replacement. I'm just trying to see what it says. It's white, self-leveling, where a self-leveling sealant is desired, and it does not say designed for, okay, so this one is designed for sealing EPDM, rubber, TPO, fiberglass, wood, aluminum. So it's pretty overall generic. I typically would not put this on fiberglass, even though it says it can. I would go with something that's specifically designed for the fiberglass. And so, Dicor does make a variety of different products, and, so normally I would say Tiffin used something in, maybe not New Flex brand or whatever, but specifically designed for fiberglass, and, because you got a little more slick coating on that. So that's probably why they said that, they're not compatible with that. So what I recommend, get the stuff that's here, since you did that, so it's a 2005 Tiffany. Here's the challenge that you have. If you haven't had that from the very start, then you don't know who's gone up and added any other kind of sealant on the top of it. So if it looks like there's a couple different layers of things up there, 2005, it might not be a bad time to go up with a heat gun on a low setting and just skim off down to, whatever you can and reseal that whole thing. That's something that I would do. So Marshall says our Sundance is a 293 towable. And Marshall, what was the question? So Marshall talked about 2021 Heartland Sundance, and the prior only hit something that gouged the side. So Marshall comes back and says our Sundance is a 29.3 towable. So I'm not really sure if we didn't answer the question or if we asked that. So maybe you can elaborate a little more on that. And I know that we have a download. I don't know if Katie put that in yet or not. We got quite a few questions I'm trying to get up to, but if you look up at the very top, I think we had grab our download on how to keep mice out of your way. So that is something that you definitely want to look at. Right front jack. Let me get back down to where I was at. This takes a little, I don't have a teleprompter for me, so. Albert Robatelli Jr. I have a 22 BH 170. I'm wondering about winter storage for the battery. Should it be removed, trickle charge, or charged in the spring, etc.? And I think we covered this. I think it was on the December 9th thing, but I'll go over it one more time because I know we got a bunch of new people on here that might not have been last night. But it depends on your batteries. It depends on if you have where you're storing it at, if you have power available or no power available, or solar panels or so forth. So typically lead acid batteries are going to drain during the wintertime. Even if you hit the disconnect switch, the LP leak detector is bypassed of the switch and it will drain the batteries in 2 to 3 weeks, which is not good. You don't want, they're going to sulfate and they could freeze and you could get all kinds of problems with them. So if you got lead acid batteries, it's best if you can plug that unit in and let your converter charge those batteries up and condition them. Make sure you shut everything else off inside. And we were talking about this last night, is you're going to have, that's the main switch. You hit that and your converter is not going to be on. So you leave this on, but you turn off your refrigerator, your air conditioners, but you leave your converter switch circuit breaker on, so it will read the batteries and maintain that 13.2 and charge them back up when they can. If you have AGM, same thing, and lithium batteries, I guess you can also do the same thing with them. But somebody asked about a trickle charger. Maybe that was a different one. If you don't have access to electricity, and one of the things that I tell people a lot of times, if you can plug in, go to Northern Tool and get a battery minder. It does a high impact waves and it conditions the battery. Not designed for lithium, unless they got something new that came out, but it's better than doing a constant charge in that. And then it just can be plugged in and hooked onto your batteries. If you don't have the option of electricity, then you've got one of two options. You either take the batteries out and take them at home and put a trickle charger on them, unless they're lithium. You don't want to trickle charge a lithium. Or you put in a solar panel that has just enough power, if you can be outside, to bring those condition those batteries. Now with lithium, all you want to do with lithium is charge the battery up to the point where it is at a full charge, and then just take the negative cables off that battery and let them sit. And so you're not providing any charge. You're not getting, if you get below freezing temperatures, you don't have to worry about it trying to charge them back up. There's nothing, they're going to hold their charge. What I did is I brought ours in here that I put in this other one, and I put a charge on it that I know is rated for lithium. So you have to kind of decide what you've got available, what kind of batteries you have, and your storage facility. And again, trickle charged. You do not want to trickle charge lithium batteries because some of the trickle charges will do a spike charge, trying to do a bulk stage. They do a variety of stages. So you don't want to do a trickle charge. You want to find something that is designed for the lithium batteries. So Joshua says, I have a 2002 Gulfstream BT Cruiser Class C while traveling through the Pacific Northwest. We had this one last night we started with. Both the furnace and the generator stopped working around the same time. The furnace is a Suburban SF25 and the Generac OVI Prime Packed 55G generator. I've tested the power to the control module for the furnace. It gets power. The thermostat makes a clicking sound. Then I turn the furnace on. Is it the control module that's bad? So we did talk about this last night. The way the furnace works is that when you get the thermostat set at a certain temperature and the temperature gets down to that, it closes the circuit. It's like taking two wires and putting them together. So it sends a 12-volt signal down to the module board. The module board then starts the motor and the fan. And so what you've got is, and your BT Cruiser is going to be a little bit different than this. It's going to be an all-in-one, but I'm going to turn this over here. So the fan starts up, and what that does is it's going to pull outside air through the intake, and it's going to purge this burner assembly and get any soot or any lingering LP or anything like that and push it out. It doesn't go inside the coach at all. It's just kind of a safety feature to make sure that that's clean and clear. It also is going to pull inside air through the cold air return, and that needs to lift this sail switch right here. So it's got to have enough power to lift that sail switch, and that tells the control module that, hey, I've got enough. I'm not going to have any buildup of LP in here. Everything's working fine. You know, I got enough 12-volt power, all this stuff working good. Open the gas valve, which you should hear a click, and then spark and light the furnace. So if you're not even getting the fan motor to start on the thing, then you've got something. You've got to decide, am I getting 12-volt power at the module board itself, which is right here on this unit. But if it's not starting anything in here, it has nothing to do with altitude or even 12-volt power. You know, sometimes if you have low batteries, it'll start up, but it won't spin fast enough for the sail switch to open up. So if none of that's happening, it's somewhere in the 12-volt coming to your board. Now, you said you've got, I've tested the power to the control module for the furnace, and it gets power. The thermostat makes a clicking noise. Well, the thermostat is what it's saying is that as soon as it gets to temperature, it's touching those two wires. That's the click that you will get. So then that kind of tells me that, you know, walk through those steps, make sure all this stuff is turned on. I do not believe there's any type of a reset on your unit. This one does not have one. But the next thing then, now sometimes you'll have a problem if it's trying to start. If that does happen and it tries to start but it doesn't start, it's very possible that you're in an altitude that's high enough, that's got, you know, thin air, that your mixture's not quite good enough. And that's where I would look at the generator. If your generator cranks like it wants to start, but it never actually kicks in, look and see if there's an altitude adjustment, a winter, summer adjustment. Some of them will have those. I'm assuming that it's a 2002. It's probably an Onan, an onboard generator. And the other thing then, once it gets that, you got to verify, is it getting spark? And so you take the spark plug out. If it's getting spark and still not doing it, then you got to check the fuel filter, know that you're getting fuel. You know, you spray a little starting fluid in the, take the spark plug out, a little starting fluid. If it fires up, then you got spark. It fires up and shuts down. You got spark, but you're not getting fuel. And then it could be, from that point, could be the fuel filter, could be the fuel pump, or more than likely it's varnish. If you have not started that generator once a month under load to burn out the carbon and the varnish that would be in there, it's going to gum up in there, and it won't start till you do basically a carburetor rebuild. Okay, so let's get into Vicky says she got 4 Winds 5000 motorhome. My fridge has always worked when plugged in, and now with the new battery I installed recently, the fridge will drain the battery if it's on. It doesn't drain if I keep a trickle charger connected to the battery. Not sure what has happened there. Any ideas? So you got a 4 Winds 500. The fridge has always worked fine when plugged in. Okay, and now with a new battery installed recently, the fridge will drain the battery if it is on. So I guess I wonder, are you still plugged in? You know, if it's draining the battery, and you didn't say what kind of fridge it is. So if it's, there's 3 different types of fridges used in RVs. There's an absorption refrigerator that runs off of 120 volt power and LP. Excuse me. There is the residential refrigerator that runs off of 120, and when you're boondocking, will go through an inverter and drain battery power. And then there's the new 12 volt compressor driven, like the Everchill and the Lippert, that are running off of 12 volt power directly from, not through an inverter, from that. If you have a residential refrigerator, and the challenge with this is getting all the pieces together. So, if it worked fine before you put this new battery in, something changed when you put the new battery in. And, are you still plugged in? Does it drain the battery when you're plugged in? If that's the case, then, you have a problem with your converter not putting enough charge into your battery while you're plugged in. Are you boondocking, and it drains the battery faster than it did before? So I guess I'm, the thing that you really need to do is take a look at, how are you using this? When is it draining? And do you have anything else on inside the coach? A lot of people forget that, oh yeah, I plugged in a CPAP machine, or I plugged in, I added this to something in there. Then it kind of gets back to the fact that maybe when the new batteries were put in, something was not installed right. So it's hard to tell. Kelly Truesdale asks, I have a 2021 Forest River IBEX. Apparently it's 6-gallon suburban water heater turned itself on and went very hot, so hot that the water lines to the sink and water blew off and water was running everywhere. I've used the water heater once since I bought the brand new. I've tried looking for solutions on the internet to no avail. The fuse to the panel is good, but if I turn it on, it shows fault. What happens, and any idea how to fix it? Also, the kitchen sink is so deep, I can't see. Okay. Well, okay. So first of all, you got a Suburban. I have an Atwood 10-gallon water heater here, but it sounds more like that you got too high water pressure. The water heater does not supply any of the pressure. And so what happens is you turn your water heater on, and it's got a thermostat in it and an ECO in it, which is an electric cutoff relay. And so you turn that on, and when it gets down to a certain temperature, it clicks in, and I think it's like 145 degrees that 6 gallons will heat up to and sit in the tank. And so the electric cutoff will keep that from going any hotter. If something happens in there and your flame, whatever, gets hotter than that point, it'll shut the unit off. So when you open the water faucet in there, the pressure is supplied either by the onboard pump that is in your rig, and it's 40 to 60 PSI in there. Older ones are going to be less than that, but you have a 2021, or you got the campground source. So my guess is that the campground source was probably from a well that has a pump in the well, and the closer you are to that well, the more pressure that thing's going to get. And so, your water heater didn't force anything into those pipes. It had to be the supply line that was putting in it. And it couldn't have gotten any more than 140 degrees, which with PEX, and I'm sure your Forest River 2021 has a PEX line. It couldn't have done that. Now, on the other hand, what could have happened is that whoever crimped the lines in that sink area did not do a proper crimp. So you've got the PEX line is going to look something. Where did I put that? Ah, it's not in there. I always guess wrong on what I'm going to bring. Oh, there it is. There we go. So this is what a typical PEX is going to be, and your hot side of it will be red, and you either have compression fittings like this, which is a flare fitting that Winnebago uses in theirs, or you've got a compression fitting that looks like this, which I do not recommend in an RV, just because of the movement you would get rolling down the road, and so even though it says it will stay, it's made. I mean, look how easy this comes out now, but of course it's been done a million times. Or you're going to have a stainless steel crimp, and they just put this little ring around. They've got a crimp tool that pushes that in. Now, if they also have some welds, but you got to hold that weld for a certain amount of time. It's a plastic ring that you hold in, and it welds it together. And my guess is that you probably had some poor fittings to begin with, and combine that with some pretty high pressure from the campground source that would have blown that out. I doubt very much it was your water heater that had anything to do with that, because it doesn't provide the pressure at all, and it does have a cutoff in the 140. What I would also recommend is that anytime you connect to a campground source, you put on one of these, and that is a 40 psi water pressure regulator, because some of these campgrounds can get amazingly high pressure water. So that would be my guess. Steven said inverter converter question. Manny, what is all the bulk and float downloading about? And I set it for the generator to come on automatically when voltage dropped. So the inverter converter, what you have is, when you have lead acid batteries, every time you drain the battery down, sulfur attacks those plates in there. And if you don't have some kind of a conditioning charging system, it's just going to do 13.6 volts till the batteries get up to 12.6. It's going to drop to 13.2. That does not break up that sulfur. So it's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. And the more sulfur on those plates, the less it's going to store, the less battery amp hours you're going to have, and they're going to be ruined in 2 to 3 years. So a lot of your multi-stage chargers and your inverter converters will have multi-stage charging. So it starts off with a bulk charge that's like 14.6 to 16 volts, breaks up that sulfur, churns that stuff up, and then it goes into a float charge, or excuse me, an equalizing charge that makes sure all the cells are all being to the same exact thing. And then it goes to a float, and the float is basically 13.2 volts. That is just kind of a maintenance charge, because your battery won't absorb power when it's down at 13.2, even though they're 12.6, so you won't overcharge those when it's there. So that's what that series of stages is doing. And if you don't have a lead acid batteries, then I would take a look at maybe the setting on it. You should have an AGM setting. And if you have lithium, I would definitely call the inverter company and see if that inverter is designed for lithium batteries, because they want just 14.6 and then drop down. So Truesdale adds, I can't see where the hose is coming from. And that's part of the issue. She's the one that had the hoses that blew out in the coming to the faucet. You may have to take the sink out. That's something that you shouldn't have to. You should be able to get in there and see, but they make these things. Engineers don't design them to work on them. That's the unfortunate part. Hi, I have a 2018 Forest River. Where we at? 455 Vibe 28.8 RLS. It comes without a battery switch. Between trips, I used to keep the rig power connected. The refrigerator and the humidifier are 120 volt. Do I have to keep the batteries disconnected, or is it okay to leave it as is? Again, if you have 120 volt power, you're fine. You know, I would just turn off the things that you don't want to run in there. Rough air conditioners, it probably won't happen, but it's just good to keep those off. I have a Winnebago Voyage 2002. When I winterized this year, even with the bypass on, the water heater tank fills with antifreeze. Winnebago says it's probably something on the back of the tank. Can I fix this myself? You should be able to get to that. I'm not familiar with the Voyage, but the nice thing about Winnebago is they have the most fantastic 3D documents you'll ever find in the RV industry. You go to winnebago.com, go to their owners' resources, and go to their then 3D prints. You'll be able to pull up your year. You got to get your model. Voyage is a 32, 35, whatever it happens to be. And you go into the water system and you will see a 3D diagram of your entire rig in there. And you will be able to tell where that bypass, where those plumbing lines come into, even with the bypass on. Now, one of the things when you're saying even with the bypass on, my guess is that you probably your bypass isn't closing, because what that's supposed to do is it's just a valve that you've got water going this way, water line going this way to the you didn't say what size it was, to the water heater, and then you got a valve right here, and it's just a diverter valve. So whatever when you're putting antifreeze in, and I'm assuming you also have a winterizing valve, which is down in your service compartment. So you put that to draw antifreeze. So your pump is going to draw from that rather than from the fresh water source. So it's drawing antifreeze in, and it should be pushing it. It gets to that diverter valve, and it should go up and around to the rest of the system, not into that six gallon tank. So anyway, go to that 3D print. Again, I doubt very much it's on the backside of that unit, because the only thing on the backside is I think you got motor aid, and you know, it's just the in and the out of it. It's more in that diverter valve. So I don't see how it could be, but you should be able to then also tell how you can get access to the backside of it. A lot of times they're underneath a closet, so you might have to take the closet door out or the drawers out. They're not real handy to work on. 2016 Forest River Shockwave Tour Hauler. Last trip we took 30 amp shore power. When I plugged the 1500 watt space heater into one of the inside outlets. I've done this before with no problem, but this time it didn't work. Can't remember if it worked or not before. I tried checking the circuit breaker outlet resets, but would not get it to work. Guessing I might have burned out the outlet. This is a very common thing. GFCIs in those, they don't normally put a really high quality GFCI in it. They find the cheapest one they can put in. I have this happen every year. We first week in February, we have a winter dance party celebrating Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper, and we bring in RVs as the green rooms because this old surf ballroom doesn't have any type of facilities for that. And they're always plugging in the heaters, bringing in these extra space heaters, and they're always blowing out the GFCIs on them. You trip that GFCI a couple times, and about the third time, it's no good anymore. And sometimes it even works, but it's ganged to the other ones, and it blew out the outgoing line of it. So I would bet money that you've got a bad GFCI on that thing. Go to home improvement store, get a good one, replace it with that. But you should be able to use a multimeter and tell power coming in, power out. So with that, we are at 5 o'clock, and I know we missed a bunch of questions here. I appreciate all everybody did. I'm just going to scroll really quick and see front seam flap over the cab, Keystone bullet. I am going to try to go back in to Marshall said no leakage. I didn't say it was a Magnum auto inverter on the Newmar Ventana 2020. So that was the inverter we were talking about, the multi-stage charging. Coachman Leprechaun with the diverter valve for city water and tank. The tank slowly fills. So I'm going to do one more here. I know we're right at 5 o'clock, but this is a good one from James. I have a 2018 Coachman Leprechaun with a diverter valve for city water and tank water. The tank slowly fills when the valve is set to the city water. I have replaced the diverter valve 2 times and still slowly fills. So what he's saying is that he has a valve in his service compartment that when he hooks a hose up pressurized to it, he can do city water throughout the whole thing. He can divert it then, and he can, that water coming in here, instead of going through the plumbing system, will go in and fill his freshwater tank. So when it's on the city side, it should be just going to the city. And when it's filling up his freshwater holding tank, what's happening is you've got now pressurized water throughout the entire system. Your city water comes in to a diverter and it goes around the water pump. So it bypasses the water pump, but it still provides pressurized water on the backside of your water pump. And so your water pump is supposed to have a check valve that only lets it go this way. And so when you got pressure coming from this way on it, because your system's a closed system, it's all going to go around and still provides pressure to this backside. On the front of that water pump is a check valve, a diverter valve here that keeps pressure. So you got the inline coming this way, you've got it whirls around, it pushes it out this way. But when I got pressure coming on this backside, this is supposed to stop that from back feeding. And it gets plastic shavings in it, it gets calcium, rust, lime, it just gets weak. And so you can replace just that valve. So if you replace the diverter valve a couple times, it's most likely this right here. So with that, appreciate everybody coming out. And one last thing, David says, how about RV wheel alignment? I'm having a hard time finding somebody who knows how. And I would agree, get in touch with the dealers because they've made arrangements. I definitely would get it aligned because you're going to load it completely different than when it came empty from the factory or the dealer. So with that, we're running a few minutes late. I appreciate everybody coming out. Have a wonderful Christmas. We probably won't see you before that. And enjoy the time with your friends and your family. And thank you for joining the club and joining me. We'll see you next month.